Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Paul Muller, who is a part of the pioneering force at Full Belly Farm, a 450-acre certified organic farm in North Central California. For over 4 decades, the farm has championed economic stability, year-round employment, and a strong community connection, ensuring nourishment for this generation and those to come. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So give us your background. How did you get into farming?
You know, I was lucky enough to be born on a farm. Father was a first-generation immigrant from Switzerland and established a dairy farm over here after World War II. The dairy farm was in the Bay Area, San Jose area, and San Jose was a thriving, was at one time one of the fastest-growing urban areas in the country. The farm was pretty quickly displaced, but farming has been in my background all my life. I went to college, and after college traveled a bit, but decided that the right livelihood and kind of a gainful livelihood that means you're contributing to the well-being of yourself and the planet, that was farming. And so we've been doing that ever since.
Very cool. So then how did Full Belly Farm come about?
Well, so farming with my family, we were growing, after the dairy, we were growing more conventional crops, alfalfa, corn, wheat, canning tomatoes became part of the mix. And there was pretty heavy dependence on pesticides and chemical inputs. It raised a lot of concerns. I think as a curious young farmer, I tried to find answers about how deadly some of the things were, or how safe products were. So investigating those things made me realize that there wasn't a lot of information about how safe they were in actual application in the field, and how much was a safe exposure. So became pretty committed to looking for another way to grow. It was also a period of time where I think anyone who's been around agriculture realizes the 50s, 60s, and 70s were very hard times for farmers. And the economic model for most farmers was simply just not working. Across the country, families were leaving at a really rapid rate. A couple thousand farm families per week were leaving during the 50s, 60s. And it was something that was clear that we needed a different model. So basically, a Full Belly has been our 40-year experiment in how to do things differently and create a different economic model and a different model for farming.
Okay. And so then was the land acquired? Was it something that you guys just went out and decided to buy, or is it kind of grown since you started?
Well, so when we first started 40 years ago, I had borrowed $10,000 to buy a tractor. My father co-signed a loan with Farm Credit, but we basically were renting small parcels in the Sacramento Valley. We were having our first child, my wife and Drew and I, who's been a partner for 40 years here and an integral part of growing this farm. We'll look for a place that might have been a little bit higher in the watershed and a little cleaner, and we ended up on the place we're at now. We rented this for about 6 years. Had a couple of children along the way, and we rented. It was a 100-acre parcel, and at one point the landowner died. His wife called us and said, "Chuck died. Would you guys want to buy the farm?" And so that's basically at the point in time we decided that we did want to buy the farm. Owning land for us was critical, about being able to plant permanent crops and being able to invest deeply in a place. It was clear that to create another model might involve not just one farm family out there, but how do we bring multiple farmers here to the farm so that we're applying different levels of skill, different aptitudes for certain parts of what you need to do to manage a farm efficiently. And so we were fortunate enough to bring in a couple of our good friends to become partners in the farm, and together we four bought this farm. We didn't have the money to buy it. We needed to figure out how we can buy it. Certainly the route every young farmer's on. And the way we decided is we were going to farm organically, build strong relationships with our consumers, um, uh, develop regional markets and not ship long distance, and develop a diversity of crops so that we had year-round cash flow. So Full Belly got started basically about 1984, and about 1989 we were able to start buying the farm and farming it the way we did. One bunch of carrot at a time. We were able to burn our note 10 years later, and so we
Wow.
were able to buy this farm. So we worked pretty hard. It's a steep road to get into farming, as most folks don't understand. But we were able to buy the farm and some equipment here, so that's where we got started. We've been here 40 years.
Okay, very cool. And then with that farm, as you grew, now you've just acquired additional, or you rent additional land beyond that 100 acres.
Yeah, that's happened over time. Certainly, we had when we first got here, there were old orchards we removed. There was some grading and leveling that we had to do, but so we focused here on this 100 acres first, and began planting tree crops and the mix of vegetables we were investing in. We invested in three farmers markets that we've been doing for almost 40 years. So we have long-term relationship with some farmers market customers. We are focused on the Bay Area, thriving, pretty well-informed organic marketplace where we could sell crops into the Bay Area, wholesale and to retail accounts. So we basically evolved our organic farm as the organic marketplace was evolving. And that's been kind of the pathway. As we've grown, we've changed our business structure from a partnership to now we're an S corp. I have three kids that are involved in coming onto the farm, and another partner on the farm has a couple of sons, and we are looking at how we manage something that's becoming increasingly complex socially with trying to meet everyone's needs and trying to grow a business that supports everyone. So it's been an evolution and a slow growth in scale. We didn't jump up to 450 acres. It's been as we had the capacity to manage more and do a good job on it, we grew the farm.
Okay. And then now of those acres, what's kind of like the crop mix and how many acres are devoted to each?
Well, so we probably grow primary crops are mixed vegetables and fruit, all organically grown. We have also integrated flowers are a big part of the farm and over the years, flowers have become one of the main crops now on the farm. We're probably
Okay.
about a tenth of our production is flowers. Tenth of our cash flow is now flowers for cut flowers. We have about 300 sheep incorporated into the farm where there are browsers. They finish crops off. They convert, they do a little digestion and fertilization, and we move them through the system. We've planted tree crops, so we have everything from peaches and apricots to figs and apples. So, so a wide diversity of fruit crops and nut crops. So it's a pretty well integrated model where the risk is spread with the diversity that we actually have. So if it's a bad year for peaches, then may not be a bad year for nuts. Or if the price for a certain crop is low, we have the flexibility to move in our vegetable crops to something that we see might be more profitable. So we're pretty flexible, and we're constantly evaluating markets and moving in and out of markets as they change.
Okay. And so then of your market streams, farmers markets, I see a kitchen, flowers. What do you do any wholesale?
Yeah, because I grew up on a farm where I saw farmers putting most of their trust in one outlet or a couple of crops.
Yes.
We now market about 15% direct to customers in a CSA box. We'd have about 1,200 families,
Okay.
1,200 families a week. We do about 15% that we do at markets. We do 3 farmers markets a week toward the Bay Area. We've done those for a long time. We have a very, very devoted, loyal customer base. We do another 20% or so, or 25% to small stores and restaurants. We have a great loyalty there. And then finally, the rest goes wholesale. Wholesale is an important part of our business, but it's probably the last place. It may be the least profitable place to go. And yet, at times, there'll be times when crops may be more valuable on the wholesale market than you can reasonably ask at a farmer's market. So we feel like we need to have a presence in all those markets and build relationships there. So each one provides an element of a more stable cash flow.
Okay. And then the team is about 80 people?
Yeah, so we have probably 60 to 70 year-round employees and about 80 people. Then you kind of peak in the summertime when we're really cranking. So yeah, it's a pretty big crew. We're a pretty labor-intensive farm, kind of
Yes.
contrary to a lot of models.
And then with that team, there you said mostly are year round. Do you bring in any H2A or is it all local?
We have people who have a long-term. We have many of our employees are 25-year or more employees. They
Oh,
and
wow.
families
Okay.
that made the first job for their kids at 16 might be working here on the farm. They have actually been the network that has brought the labor in that we need here at the farm. Um, and so we're very fortunate that way. If we do have a need in the summer for extra labor, there are labor contractors in the area. Get
Okay.
a small crew for a week or a month to help out with harvest. So um, labor has been something here that again it is both running contrary to what most farmers are wanting to do in their system. It's a critical part of what we do in adding value. Having skilled labor that we employ year round means that we have people who are skilled year to year to year, know what to do, understand the system, know the quality that we want, and they're a huge asset. So we decided years ago to design the farm so that we had year-round production that allowed a year-round employment.
Yeah. So there are farms in California, even though California is very temperate, that are only seasonal.
There are, yeah. I mean, many of the farms in California grow one crop. They they
Really?
they say they may grow a tomato crop. So canning tomatoes now are in our region are an important crop. Farmers will soon start transplanting. Some of the early crop that goes in will be harvested by mid July, and that ground will be
Okay.
barren for the rest of the year. By and large, they don't plant a lot of cover crops. We're pretty much an anomaly. Some of that is because of water concerns,
Okay.
and they're looking at a annual water cycle. They're mostly focused on the crop as the user of water, and maybe less focused as I think they should be on infiltration and carbon in the
Yes.
ground that provides a sponge-like effect, so water lasts a bit longer. Um, but for a lot of farms in California produce one crop. In intensive areas like the Salinas Valley, Imperial Valley, or on the coast, farmers there, because land rent might be three or four, $5,000 an acre, be
Mm.
planting multiple crops. So that land is more valuable because of the climatic area that it's in and
Yes.
the market niche it fits,
So they're paying for rent $3,000 to $5,000 an acre per year.
if not more. Yeah, in those
Wow.
areas. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah.
But all the infrastructure, for example, in Salinas Valley or Watsonville area or on the coast, is there to pick and pack and ship. All the infrastructure makes that a kind of very profitable place to be. And there's a lot of the country that receives lettuce out from the Salinas Valley in California. So
Correct.
that network exists, and those farmers know it. They take advantage of that.
Gotcha. So it's because of the support system, it's a lot easier and it makes sense.
And climate, I
Yeah.
mean, such a benign climate there that those crops work
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
So then you're farther north and you actually do have seasonal cooler times. I mean, do you guys get frost and how cold does it typically get?
Yeah, so we have we may get frost get to 27, certainly not a lot lower than that generally. And that might be the 3 weeks around New Year's, before and
Okay.
after New Year's, so the coldest time. This last year we've had a fairly mild winter. We have a lot of crops that we plant as during the winter time, knowing that we have to be picking something for cash flow. We're choosing hardy varieties that will survive those 27-degree mornings, and
Mhm.
um, where it allows us to be picking things. So right now on the farm, we're picking carrots and beets and broccoli and cauliflower, lettuces, turnips, kind of a wide range of crops. We have our spring onions just starting, asparagus will be starting, and we'll have garlic, fresh garlic that'll be coming in soon. So we look, and it's been wet this year, so it's there's a little bit of sinning that's going on. Perhaps you can call it that when you're out in the field and it's too wet. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
out there. But we do have those employees that need work, and we have demand, and so we are picking at that time. It's a bit
Okay.
of a yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk organic because I know that's really important to you. That was one of the reasons you're on the farm you are and doing that. And at the beginning, there wasn't a organic program, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to. Our farm is CCUF's number 9 farm, the ninth farm that CCUF signed up in California.
Okay.
No, we were involved in the formation of CCUF, working with some of the folks who were saying we need both a rule that would govern what organic is, and in California, that rule, the first rule, was written under the Health and Safety Code, because it
Okay.
was clear that the California Department of Food and Ag wouldn't ante up and support an organic program. Organic was seen as heretical, kind of a heresy. Um, um,
Mhm.
Good many folks in our UC systems and our land grant colleges had invested careers in things like herbicides and fertilization programs and the genetics of plants that responded well to high fertility programs. Insect control was looked at from a very very narrow lens of products. So it was clear that there was not a lot of integrated thinking. It was a bit of silo thinking of how farms utilize particular products to solve particular issues rather than thinking about it systemically. And we have always had the focus that the farm has to be seen as a much larger ecosystem. And we're integral to that ecosystem, so our decisions are impacting it, but that we can biologically enhance soil fertility. We can step into carbon cycling, that is, liberates nutrients in the soil microbially and biologically and chemically. That we can grow a lot of the beneficial insects we need here on our farms to
Mhm.
protect our crops. That avian life and other things are things that we can foster here. So I think we had an orientation that says, kind of how do we explore what the potentials are if we say we're not going to use those products. And at the time we started, that was like jumping off a cliff and
Mm.
without much of a parachute, but it was with the belief that it would work. And I think
Mm.
over time, organic has proven that it is a not only viable, but it has the elements of a real sustainable regenerative system at its roots. And certainly the organic farms I know are farming mindful of a whole different set of tools than most conventional farmers are thinking about.
Mhm. Looking at the system, not the crop.
Yes.
Now, you obviously went through the entire organic program and then saw the need for an additional program, which is why you're real organic. What would you say was the day that you realized, oh my gosh, this is actually not, I don't know, strict enough, or what was the conversation?
Well, I think if you look at the evolution of organic, as the marketplace in different states and different counties evolved, people had maybe marginally different ideas what organic meant. So the USDA stepped in, said let's create a uniform standard, and the Organic Food Production Act was established. That gave the USDA basically what they see as control of what organic is. They at the time it was established, I think they really saw it as a marketing program. They didn't believe in the biology. That was kind of a woo woo voodoo kind of notion
Mm.
that was I think I've heard USDA spokespeople early on call it a gimmick. And so they weren't fully behind it, and probably were reticent to really support it 100% and get behind the principles of organic. It became clear that the USDA was drifting. because of enforcement for things like confinement feeding operations, or for now the kind of creeping introduction of hydroponic systems, soilless systems, container systems, systems that really aren't based on cycling of nutrients and cycling of carbon, um, in a soil system that where you're looking to build its fertility over time. And it became clear and clear that USDA was willing to listen to um, folks who had the resources and the money to lobby the USDA to make their kind of agriculture happen. And so I think we're seeing here in California direct competition now from hydroponic operations. And they don't call themselves hydroponic at times, but they are, um, they'll call themselves container systems, or um, um, any number of things to not really use the word hydroponic, but basically those are systems where the plant's life is supported by liquid nutrients that basically have, and there's no contact with soil, or they may be grown in a soil-like medium where liquid nutrients are dripped to them, in order to provide them what they need to grow. Became clear USDA didn't have the guts to really enforce that, or the will to enforce, and call that out as something that might not be considered organic. Certainly, they didn't follow the lead of Canada or Mexico or the EU or other countries that said soilless systems, or hydroponic systems cannot be called, the food can not be called organic. And they capitulated. And so it became clear that we needed to think that through. We needed to clarify for consumers what's grown in the ground and what's grown in systems that basically we have plants on IV. They're getting a drip in order to survive. And I think that's an important distinction. Consumers should have an opportunity to choose, and Real Organic is a way to say let's clarify this and differentiate the systems that are supporting the plant and the food that you're consuming.
And talk a little bit about why that you just mentioned it there, the difference between something on an IV and something standing on its own legs and, working, which is, I think, what, soil grown crops are.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about the carbon, the microbes.
I mean, that's one of the most amazing things that in the 40 years we've been farming has been the evolution of these ideas of what's happening in soil. I think there was when we first started, there was kind of a belief that soil was a critical piece, but I don't think anyone really understood the complexity that you have. Literally thousands and thousands of species in the soil. You have, trillions of microbes in a handful of soil. You have the complex interrelationships where at any one time, it's just a small percentage of those microbes might be active, but they have triggers that will activate them. They all have relationships with plants and plant roots. So their fungal life and bacterial life are the foragers. They're the disseminators of information. They have a symbiotic relationship with the plant itself. So they're working to keep the plant healthy because the plant is in fact keeping them fed. There's been more conversation about the two-way relationship between, photosynthesis and liquid carbon, the sugars that are exuded in the root system that feed that complex biology. And the more we look at it, the more we realize it is a vastly underappreciated and complex system that provides a wide range of what a plant needs to be healthy. And when a plant is healthy, it's clear, like a human body, that you can resist diseases and you resist the insects that may come and cause diseases. And so it's clear that those microbes are a dynamic living community that are critical to plant health.
And so, okay, so we have the soil system. It's interesting that in the last year, I think I've learned more about soil and systems and different nutrients. And we're doing a lot of SAP tests now because
Right.
we have very high aluminum and high chlorides in our water.
Uh-huh.
And so the first year we started farming, everything did great. The second year is like, oh, we're starting to see some issues. And the third year we were struggling.
Wow.
And, I've been doing it for now 18, 19 years. And so I was like, am I losing my edge or something?
Right.
And then we started seeing that. So just the importance of what's actually in there.
Right.
And then what we learned was when we started injecting carbon, which is basically microlyzed biochar,
Uh-huh.
just the immediate effect of
Uh-huh.
going from a very challenged environment to actually that being able to tie up some of those
Right.
yeah, aspects and
Right.
making a big difference.
Right. And some of that is the movement of ions and attaching itself to different particles, to carbon or
Hmm.
to clay particles. Other pieces of that are mediated biologically.
Hmm.
So I think so. In going back to what the fundamental differences are, where's the argument about whether you can make food that's as good dripping it and with the nutrient solution or growing it in the ground? Um, I don't have a problem with the technology of hydroponic agriculture, and if folks think that that's the future because of whatever water savings in low water environments and other things, but it's simply not organic. And
No.
organic, at its inception, the organic rule was about having a farming system that is constantly looking to improve soil through
Hmm.
manuring and through cover crops and the techniques that farmers had identified in looking at centuries long systems that were sustainable over time. Um, those were not deeply spelled out in the Organic Food Production Act, but the brief reference there makes it clear that this is a practice that is considered organic. As the USDA began to assert more and more power over what the idea of organic is, I think they allowed those ideas to slip because they didn't have a deep belief in the complexity of soil.
Hmm.
Um, but I think all farmers right now, the conversation's changing, and the kind of the common language that more and more farmers are talking about is carbon. And
Hmm.
it's clear that carbon in the atmosphere is has some of it is a problem, potentially warming the planet to a place where we're going to see changes that I think in the Midwest you got such a warm winter that it's just remarkably
Hmm.
abnormal. Out in California, we've had years in Januaries and Februarys in the last 5 or 6 years where we could go do groundwork because there was no rain. This last year we had almost 50 inches of rain, which is an incredible amount of rain. There was something like 16 feet of snow up in the Sierra Nevadas. It was remarkable. So we're seeing these wide swings, and certainly weather swings wide at times. But I think some of the trends we're seeing is that the wide swings are making it more challenging. I think one of the things that organic farmers got right was that when you pay attention to the soil, there's a whole linkage of health benefits in terms of plant disease resistant, plant insect and pathogen resistance, and then probably the quality of food that comes out of that system. And again, it's the as you look at the biology of a plant and the fact that bacteria can move in and out of the vascular system of a plant, so they're moving out of the soil into the plant, back into the soil. It's a very, very beautifully complex system that I think we hung our hat, conventional agriculture hung its hat on a few pieces, and those pieces were carbon, not carbon based, but they were nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and the elements that allowed you to grow a crop. And most of agriculture is still focused on that, and I think a lot of soilless systems are looking for solutions that kind of mimic what a plant needs.
Hmm.
And they can grow nice looking lettuce hydroponically, and they can grow beautiful tomatoes. But what's happening now is that because there's no distinction between what's grown in the ground and what's grown in soilless systems, we're being flooded by everything from tomatoes to berries to vegetables from countries that can't actually sell those products as organic in their own country, be it Canada or Mexico. They can't sell a hydroponic tomato as organic in Canada or Mexico or in the EU. But in fact, those things can be shipped to the US market, sold here, and there's no differentiation. So real
Hmm.
organic was the tool that a number of farmers got together and said, how do we affect this? Um, we had invested, all of us, I think, around the table that in some of those early conversations had invested a lifetime in building organic. It seemed like it was the wrong thing to say, well, we're going to throw it out and start over. Rather, it was decided that what we're going to do is create an add-on label to the organic program. We're still certified as organic farmers, but we're trying to differentiate between what farmers are doing in the soil and what they're doing in a laboratory, and what consumers can trust in terms of the products that they're buying. So that's where Real Organic came about.
And to me, I think it's a huge part of it is just the resilience of it, that real organic is way more resilient. I like to people, they say, "Oh, well, are you into this vertical farming thing?" And I was like, "No." I was
Uh-huh.
like, if the power grid went out, what would still be left? My
Right,
farm that's based on soil, and I would be growing lettuce there for years
right,
to come. But this
right,
vertical farm would literally be just a pile of plastic.
right. Well, and resilience also is, if you have a prolonged drought,
Mhm,
which crops thrive? What are the techniques that you might use in order to be more resistant? And that's putting more carbon in the ground, having better water holding capacity, having a root system that it can forage deeper and find the micronutrients it needs. Um, there's all the pieces for resilience are built on healthy soil. And so you're exactly right. If you turn off the switch in those systems and the water didn't drip into those plants in a container, they simply wouldn't last. But in a
mhm,
good healthy organic system, you have many higher degrees of resilience there. So I
mhm,
think it's important. The other piece that's really important is that agriculture is part of culture, and it is about how we tenure this earth, and how we actually impact the planet through our practices and grow healthy
mhm,
food. It is part of the culture that we're all wrapped up in. If you're a farmer, whether you farm corn and soy in the Midwest or whatever, you are building a business that is intimately connected to a place and to a culture and to a people and to a community, and it means it's dependent upon how you take care of your land. And
mhm,
that's our challenge. Our challenge isn't to grow more food cheaply. It's really to figure out a model whereby we're stewarding the resources we have, taking
mhm,
care of the communities that depend on those resources and the activities there, and building something that's long term. And
mhm.
I think that we tend to get mesmerized by the whiz bang ideas. Certain investors will throw a lot of money at these vertical farm systems that can convert a New Jersey warehouse into a farm, but that's not sustainable. It's simply folks running after a new idea that when they don't know a whole lot about biology.
And I think we're starting to see a lot of them go belly up. I forget which one recently within the last year, but it was, a massive millions and millions invested. And the whole thing they just shut the doors and said, we realize this is not sustainable anymore financially. And that's with all
Right.
the subsidies and everything they were getting already.
Right. Yeah, and a tremendous amount of capital attracted to it to allow it to operate at a loss for a number of years. Try doing that in on your farm,
Yeah.
operate at a loss for 10 years, and people still add money to the pot because they believe in the hype of the idea. So no, you have to be real, and we have to be real also.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hello, dear listeners. As the green shoots of spring emerge, signaling planting season in full swing, isn't it the perfect time to bring new life onto the land? At shop.growingfarmers.com, a treasure trove awaits to transform even the most forgotten corner of your space into a vibrant oasis. Imagine lush elderberries and willows swaying in the breeze, or the sweet promise of homegrown strawberries and the hearty depth of rhubarb pie made from your harvest. Perhaps you've pondered over the joy of harvesting your own potatoes. Well, ponder no more. Our small business is dedicated to bringing you an exceptional variety of plant material to make these dreams a reality. We're shipping daily, ensuring that your planting ambitions are supported with timely and quality deliveries right to your doorstep. So if you've been eyeing that sunny spot by the fence or considering how to fill that quiet corner of your yard, look no further. Our perennial selections are not just plants. They're future harvests, memories, and the beginning of a more sustainable lifestyle right from your own land. Visit shopgrowingfarmers.com today and make the first step towards a greener, more fruitful farmstead or garden. We can't wait to grow with you.
So talk to us a little bit about how you use cover crops on the farm and also to the animals. You've got animals in the farm
Sure,
too.
sure. So I think maybe the simplest way I'm beginning to think about it is that what we really do as farmers is harvest sunlight. And the idea is how, because sunlight is the energy drives it, drives the system, and the more we can harvest that sunlight and through living plants, the more energy you're going to capture in your system. So for us, a crop, the financial crop, the broccoli or the carrots or the sweet corn or the melons are a piece of a much larger system. And if we can grow those crops in soil where we've been harvesting carbon and putting that carbon back in the soil, or using that carbon to cover and protect the soil, we've just gained some real free resources, courtesy of the sun and living plants and water, and the CO2 in the atmosphere. So we grow cover crops. Right now we have many of our fields are planted in a multi-species mix. There's some really interesting stuff coming out, and it came out of some research in Switzerland and in Australia, and farmers here in the U.S. now are seeing cover crop cocktails that may have a minimum of 8 species, 4 families minimum, but adding more families. And what happens there, I think the thinking is that you begin to build the biological communities underneath those plants that respond to the sugars that the plants are exuding. And you create a more complex community because you're feeding more complex life there. So our cover crops now will have a mix of things. Somebody, Christine Jones, remarked, did a lecture, talked in a lecture. She's an Australian microbiologist and soil scientist. She's a wonderfully smart gal. She talked about how 70% of those want to be forbs, so kind of broadleaf plants. And I'm beginning to think that there's something to it, because you can see over a single species cover crop, these multi-species cover crops just are thrive and move and really generate a lot of material. So we've been working with cover crops for 40 years and are very, very committed to that as part of our soil feeding cycle. So we have winter cover crops planted now. We're starting to terminate some of those crops. The termination, then we have to manage the digestion of that crop. The termination might involve mowing and light incorporation and allowing it to dry down a bit before we add plants there. We'll plant in the springtime. Following these winter crops, we'll plant a kind of a tweener cover crop, something that has some mix of summer hardy things that love heat and some of the late spring stuff that we can get in there. And then we'll also do that in the fall. So we're always, if we have an opening, we're adding cover crop. The issue here in California that is perhaps a problem is that we have to irrigate those things. So we need water to irrigate these cover crops. But when we don't have water, we can also take a cover crop and mow it down and just leave it on top of the ground, so we can protect the soil. Some of the rules I think that are coming kind of to bear, and folks are really talking about, or for soil health are, armoring your soil, growing diversity in your soil, incorporating animals if you can, really looking closely at any mechanical disturbance, and that can include herbicides and other things, and kind of following those rules and keeping your ground covered is, if you can do that. Now in vegetable crop systems, we've been working on that for a while, trying to figure out how we do that here in California, and I think that's maybe there's a Rosetta Stone there, and maybe a lot of farmers here who are growing vegetables realize that for weed control, perennial weeds, and for some of the small seeded crops we do, tillage is an important piece of what we do. So we're not tillage bashers. We use tillage in a mindful way when we can, but as much as we can, we have something growing on our fields as much of the year as possible.
Yeah. You sent over a picture that actually I think had some squash planted, like almost strip tilled into a cover crop.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk
so
a little bit about that.
So we we've been trying to develop tools here, and try to figure out how we do it. So we thought, well, we'll take a look at what the Midwest is doing, and these Yetter strip tillers. We were able to find some of those. We broke them down so they fit. They didn't need 250 horsepower or 300 horsepower to pull them. So we broke them down and made them work in our system. That was a winter cover crop that we terminated. When it was about right in terms of the ripening of the grain. We left it there because it wasn't the time to plant those squash. It was too early to plant squash when the cover crop was mature. So we left that material on the ground. It dried a bit on the ground and died there. The roller crimper doesn't work great here, and we had to roll it a couple of times to get it to die. And then when we were ready to plant, we pre-irrigated the ground. We put
Okay.
mulch on
Yep.
the ground, left the mulch there, and then we strip tilled that, and we planted into that strip tilled, and then we actually topped that with some compost. We dropped compost right near the seed line. When we planted, we also added a little bit of a starter in there with that's a microbial starter.
Okay.
And that crop looked great. It actually worked really well. But we tried in crops like melons, and melons are just a bit too tender. There's too many things that want to go eat a melon's plant as it comes out of the ground. And so you have a good looking stand coming up, and you'll have other things kind of move out of the mulch and decide they're gonna chew on that melon stem.
Yeah.
Sweet corn works. Corn works fine. There's certain crops that work in that kind of system. So we're adapting our strategies to figure out which crops we can do that with. We can transplant into that, but we're also finding that some of the nutrient cycling changes when you don't till. I think beginning to feel like when you and understand that when you till, you get a pretty robust bloom of microbes, bacteria primarily, that chew up that carbon that you've added in there. They live, they consume, they die, they off gas, they become part of the digestion, and a lot of the nutrition subsequent to that is gained from living off these dead bodies of microbes and what they have released in it in that soil in terms of nutrients that are available to the plant. So we're always experimenting here. We're always trying new things, and we would love to reduce the amount of tillage that we do, but for certain crops, we realize we just can't grow carrots. We don't know how to do it yet to grow carrots, for example,
Yeah.
in soil that has a tremendous amount of residue on the top of the soil. We grow a lot of weeds that we then have to deal with mechanically
Yeah.
so we're not spending a lot of time hoeing and using labor to control those.
Yeah. Are you using any like the stone barrier type so you can run with the more high trash and it still puts a seed bed on top?
I don't know what you call a stone barrier type. I mean um, Maverick units. They're Yetter units. They will move residue to the side and create a strip
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's plantable, and you can do that at pretty high speed and get then you come back and plant into that strip, and that seems to be a reasonable way to get
Yeah.
maintain the mulch there. But then, I mean, the way a lot of growers are doing it here, they're burying drip, putting drip underneath those plants, and so they don't have to have surface water to stimulate weeds. That requires some fairly precise planning, getting that seed, that tape in the ground early.
Correct.
And so there's just, each new idea, then you have to do the thinking that goes along with making that idea, the development of the tools, timing, other things that make that idea work. And so we trying a lot, but there's different tolerances in our own crew here, our own team for experimentation. It means that everybody has to be on board or it doesn't really work.
Absolutely. What does the summer rainfall look like out there? Because you keep talking about, lack of rain. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Well, so our rainy season starts in late October, November. We get the bulk of our rain in December, January, February, March. Rains generally taper off this time of year. We can get rains in April and May, but by and large, they begin to create windows here where you can plant and get into your fields. They dry out. We don't have generally measurable rainfall in the months of June, July, August, September, and occasional rain. So California's beauty is, and the reason why we can resist diseases and other things is that
Yeah.
we're not a wet place. We're fairly dry, and disease is not as big an issue as when you get a lot of rainfall,
Mhm.
and unpredictable rainfalls. We have a good friend who was just here who farms in Minnesota out there, Jack Hadeen from Featherstone Farm.
Yes,
And,
Jack.
and Jack's a good friend. He was here as an intern, and he and his wife had their first child here at the farm. So we've got a long history with Jack and Jetty and his three boys.
Mhm.
But Jack was talking about how difficult it's been for you folks out in the Midwest with big rainfalls, 5, 6 inches of rain that come in an event, and how he's moving more and more to plastic and other things to kind of create stability, enough stability and ability to get on the ground, and not be thwarted time and time
Yeah.
again by unpredictable rains.
Yeah, he has some challenges up there that we don't even have. I think he has it worse up there with the his soil type too, I feel is a bit heavier than ours.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's talk about. I wanted to bring this up here. You are bringing on the next generation of your kids. I think you said some of your partner's kids are coming on as well. Talk through a little bit about what that looks like and kind of like some of the things you thought about to make that possible.
Well, I think one of the things that has made it happen is that early on we developed an internship program here. We
Okay.
invited young people to come work on the farm. I think when you're a kid growing up on a farm and you see other smart young people coming to a farm and affirming that where you are
Mhm.
is kind of a cool place, and that you can enjoy life there. I think that inspired them a little bit. I think we've always felt the farm has to be kind of dynamic and creative. So each of the three kids who come, I have four children. My wife Drew and I have four children, and each of the three that have come back, well, actually four of them were here at one time. My daughter Hallie started a summer camp and did an education program on the farm. My
Oh,
son
very
Ryan
cool.
what's that?
It's
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah,
that
it's
was her.
awesome.
That was her. That what she wanted to do, and that's what she hung her hat on, and developed a whole program here, where we were bringing 250 to 300 kids a summer in school groups here, to experience the farm and get to know the farm. And it was a remarkable program. My son Ammon came back and was sure that when he left the farm, he didn't want to farm here at all. He traveled a bit in the world, around the world, and saw a lot of things, and I think he decided that this is not a bad place.
Yeah.
But on the way, he decided he had a passion for cooking, and so he came to the farm, and we invested. We dug deep and invested in a kitchen. So we have a
Okay.
certified kitchen that finishes farm products. He hosts events there. He does weddings. So he integrated a whole kind of culinary, adding value through culinary products here on the farm, and then built also on this, making the farm tangible to people, so they can come visit, and events that bring people to the farm. So he and his wife Jenna and their three kids live here on the farm, and they're doing that on the farm. My son Rye is doing livestock, does the livestock on the farm. He does a lot of the equipment work. He does his field work. He plants. He's a general roustabout here on the farm, and is really valuable. And he has three kids
Okay.
that are part of the farm. And then my daughter Hannah is doing flowers with my wife. So we farm about 30 acres of flowers every year. On 15 acres of summer flowers, and then maybe 15 acres of fall and winter flowers. So it's a pretty big enterprise, and that is what she's hanging her hat on, and so she enjoys that a lot. So she's now taking that enterprise on. So
Yeah.
part of having uh, your kids come to the farm, I think, is not demanding that they do everything that you did exactly the way you like to do it. So it's stepping back a little bit and giving them the freedom to go ahead and express themselves with an enterprise on the farm, and trusting their judgment.
Mhm.
having them get their feet involved in business decisions on the farm. And so we changed from a partnership when we had four of us as partners to an S corp where they can buy shares, and they can buy ownership interest in the farm, and we can fractionalize that ownership down to individual shares. So they are now shareholders in the farm, and we sit together as equals at around a table and make the decisions about where this farm is going and what we're going to do, crops, etc. So, yeah, I think to bring your kids back to the farm is to have them experience the seduction of what farming is. That it's a very cool way to be. It's very cool to be your own determining, what you're doing every day, and being responsible for the outcomes of your decisions. And then finding that when you create a diverse farm like we have here, where things right now are fields are flowering, and there's pollinators, and there's birds, and we have flights of birds come through here, and we have researchers who come. We had a researcher come from Washington who looked at organic farms, said we had one of the highest bird populations of any organic farm he'd visited. So we have birds here that, because of the way we've designed the farm and the way we've integrated orchard and field crops, where things show up and they create the delight, and again, it's kind of a seduction. It's falling in love with a place, and so that's kind of the key, I think, and then ultimately getting out of their way. So, as you know, I'm 70, my wife is 66. We have to figure out how we get out of their way. Help, we still value hopefully they value our opinions, and we're still working full time, but we also have to begin to allow them to make the decisions and know that we are working with them and for them ultimately.
Because that's something that you hear a lot, is that the kids don't want to come back to the farm because of their time when they were kids on the farm. Would you say there was anything really intentional about how you raised them to make sure they didn't hate the farm?
Well, I mean, I think it was all those things I mentioned there.
Yeah.
They and we're fortunate here in California. We had neighbors who were farmers at the same time. Their kids grew up with our kids. Their kids are now farming. There was something about the culture that says that said this is a viable and valuable occupation. It is something that can be challenging, but also really rewarding. I think that they saw that there were people they admired who came through the farm and added a piece to this farm, and who they grew as friends to, whether they were 6 years old or 15 or 12 years old. It allowed them to see that the farm was a good place to be, and it was right livelihood. It was good way to make a living. So I don't know that and I think we always try to give them a sense that this is a place of discovery, and where you can do different things. And I know I've talked to some young Midwestern farmers who said, my dad said we farm 2,000 acres, but he said there's no room for you here.
Correct.
There's no enterprise. But it seems to me like you have to imagine new enterprises. You have to imagine new ways to turn a dollar, or new ways to do things. Because on acreage like that, you have all the pieces that you need for success. You have the equipment, you have the land, you have a history, you have knowledge, but maybe it's not going to be corn and soy, or maybe it's not going to be corn and soy and feeder cattle. It's going to be thinking it through a little differently.
Well, I think another huge aspect is that you've built a audience of people that love Full Belly, and that were just more than happy to support you in another way, through flowers, through the kitchen, through all these other things.
Yeah, I mean, you have to cultivate your market. No matter what you do. I mean, a lot of farmers will plant something and then go think about the market as they get closer to harvest. Whereas I think you have to think about the market before you even plant it. You have to think about where it's going to go and where you can sell it for a fair price. So that means sometimes you have to find the people who are empathetic as to what a fair price is. Your local grain dealer won't say to you, hey, you grew some beautiful corn, and you had a great yield, and boy, I'm glad to handle it. But they won't say, well, I'm going to give you, extra because this is what's fair. even though the market price is at $6, I'm going to give you $9 because you did such a good job. It doesn't happen. So you
No.
need people, you need to find a market. It's a really important piece, whether you're in the middle of Ohio or up in Minnesota or out here in California, and you have to cultivate that market. And it's harder to do in some places, but I think there's you go when you travel across the country, you realize, boy, there are a lot of local vegetables that aren't on the grocery stores shelves in the middle America that are coming from California and could be grown there, could be grown a lot of the year there. So we're fortunate because we've cultivated long-term relationships. You know, at our farmers markets, we have families where the parents brought their kids to the market when we started, and their kids are now shopping with their kids, and they watched our kids grow, and I got my
Yeah.
son brings his kids to the market. It is a deep relationship, and
Yeah.
they are loyal customers. They come. We had rain the other market. I went last Saturday to Palo Alto. It was raining, and we still had one of the better days we've had because people showed up. They felt responsible to come and
Yeah.
buy what they need to buy. So how do you do that in today's world? Boy, I hope we can recreate that because it's a valuable part of capitalism when
Yeah.
people can make choices and choose to keep money local, keep it circulating to people they know, and watch the benefit of stabilizing a food source when you want to know where food comes from.
Hmm.
It's a different orientation to the market.
Hmm. One final question here before we go, because I really appreciate your time. What would your advice be to new farmers?
Well, so if say you're a brand new farmer and you want to get started, I would say find good soil, right? Find a place that's good soil that has, like you said, you have a southern slope. That makes a big difference. Find it with the climatic edge that makes it possible to farm there. Two, look around at who's around that new land and make sure you're finding a community. It's a lot easier to have two kids, and when someone gets sick and you still have to milk a cow, to have a neighbor will say, "Look, I'll help you out," or to do the same thing for your neighbor. I really believe farming. We've kind of got off on the wrong notion that we think farming is one family out there fighting, kind of busting their butt to make a success, where really it's a community activity, and we've eroded and we've disintegrated our rural communities. So I would say the second piece of advice is, find a good place that has good people around it who are like-minded, who can support you. Three, think about the market. Where if you find a great piece of land and you find a great community, where are you going to sell your product and what are you going to grow that allows you to create an economic success? The market again is critical. And so what are you going to choose to grow that you like to grow? That if you like watermelons, grow watermelons, because it's a lot easier to grow something you like to grow and that you really love. So,
Yeah.
choose things that you really love to grow. And I think it makes farming a lot more enjoyable. And then four, think about diversity. How do you diversify your thinking so that you're now integrated into a more complex system? I think that there's a kind of a good recipe there.
No, that was great. What would you say your favorite crop is?
Oh my God, it depends what day of the week it is. When the apricots come in, it's got to be apricots. But then the plums follow that, and boy, good plum is better than you get tired of apricots, but you like plums, and then the peaches
Yeah.
start. And peaches, boy, that I can forget about plums and apricots because the peaches are so great. And I love growing melons, and
Yeah.
we just it's fun when you have a lot of different crops. Each one, you look forward to each one, and about the time you've had your 25th melon, you're saying, well, I'm looking forward to maybe some apples coming in here soon. And so
Yeah.
I mean, allow yourself to be seduced by all of these crops, and when they come, and enjoying the season that brings them to you. I think that's the key. So I have lots of favorites.
Okay. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate your wisdom.
Well, thank you very much. It was enjoyable to be here, and I hope the conversation was useful to folks out there. And we're a pretty open farm. If people get to California and wanna swing by Full Belly, they're welcome to see what we're doing here. Okay.
I will absolutely if I get out there.
Okay. Well, your listeners too.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.